As I started working with these two devices together, I came up with this analogy, and let me know if you think it's correct. The Move is like a coloring book. You color inside the lines. It's a very structured and clean experience. The 404, on the other hand, is more like a completely blank canvas that you can be experimental, you can be as abstract as you want, but you can also just paint a normal picture. There's just no lines for you to color in. For me, in my workflow, they complement each other very well, and here's a few reasons why. First of all, I always like pairing a synth with the 404 because I like to sort of write my own melodies, work out my own chord progressions, and then resample them in. I've got this sample right here that came from the Move. It's actually pitched down. It was originally up here in pitch. But like just taking a sample and pitching it down already creates a certain mood. And then instead of like playing in chords in a traditional 1, 2, 3, 4, like playing in your progression, you chop those chords. And you can now like reorder them. And it's about getting sound from the Move, but then pushing it a little further through resampling and effects with the SP404. And to continue with this point about sampling, while I don't think it's too difficult to import certain samples, it is a little menu divey on the 404. I got to import from the SD card, then go to samples, then find the pack I want to pull from, then find the sample. On the Move, on the other hand, I've got this drum kit here that has 16 samples in it ready to go. And if I go to this drum sample or drum rack page, I can pretty much instantly preview a bunch of different kits very quickly. So instead of like finding one sample and putting it into a pad on the 404, I can scroll through the Move and find an instant unique set of 16 samples right off the bat. So whether I want to record simple one-shots, which I did here, I basically just found a kick that I liked. But then to follow the same concept that we talked about before with the synths, I was able to find some hi-hat that I liked, and then some perks, and just play this pattern in on the Move, but sampled into the 404. And one thing that they've added with updates later on the 404 is that when you record samples in, you can record samples at a specific bar length. So if I already know what tempo my beat is at, and I just want to record an 8-bar loop, boom, play it in from the Move. It'll be human, it'll be unquantized, but we get it in here as a pad sample on the 404. And then we can combine that all together. Sampled synths, sampled drum one-shots and drum loops, and we start to get a groove going. Now, could I just do some of that sequencing and resampling on the Move? Yes and no, but the SP404 has a certain sound, and if you want to take your beats to the next level and do some type of performance style stuff with it, another useful thing is the use of the bus effects using bus 1 and 2. And what I've learned is that separating your melodic and harmonic instruments from your drums is actually a great idea, because now those effects are only happening on the drums. I'm sending my drums and my melodic stuff to different effects. So no matter what effect I'm triggering, one part of the beat stays intact, which kind of keeps the flow going. You don't have that kind of advanced effects technique stuff going on the Move. That is something that the SP404 is well known for. So to bring it back to that analogy, I can very much color in the lines. I can sequence a drum beat if I want. I can write all my synth parts fairly comfortably here on the Move, but on the 404, they start to just feel a little more special because there's a little more of that experimental blank canvas element where I can just push the sounds further. But it's not all about just sucking sounds out of the Move and putting them onto the 404. What we can do as well is use the Move as an accompanying instrument. So I can solo over my beats with Move while a beat on 404 is playing. Even so, I can easily switch instruments too. So it's just something that can elevate the music, especially if you are going to do like some type of performance with these two devices. And something we should absolutely not sleep on are the input effects. So I can take this, nice synth sound here and run it through the cassette simulator. And just give it, that extra character. Now, since we mentioned input effects, let's talk about another cool feature of the Move that we can use in conjunction with the SP404, and that is actually the mic. So we can monitor the mic. This is going to sound kind of weird, I think, in this context, but check 1 2, check 1 2. I'm now using the built-in mic on Move to sample into the 404. And I mentioned input effects before. If you want, let's turn that off. And I mentioned input effects before, but there's also an auto pitch effect. So if you want to record vocal samples but be locked in key, I actually did this on this beat. So that's my voice, and I just used the Move mic to sample into the 404. In this ambient track that I've been working on, I sampled in these bell samples and a lot of different little percussion textures. That really helped bring that track to life, but again, that was made possible by using the built-in mic on the Move. Yes, I could hook up other things, maybe my field recorder to use as a mic with the SP404, but think about how this Move has a built-in mic and a bunch of other features that we've already talked about. And while we're here on this ambient track project, I want to point out that I loaded in like a 3-minute long field recording of a thunderstorm into the 404, and I can just have that sample play on, and I can get a bunch of samples looping here. And that's something you can't really do on the Move. Again, going back to the analogy of coloring in the lines with Move, we can only do 16 bar patterns. We can do long samples in the drum rack, but with the decay, it's hard to get them to play full out, especially if you have a sample longer than 1 minute. I can load up samples up to 16 minutes here on the SP404. And not only that, when we go into the session view on the Move, we can only create 8 patterns per instrument. We can create quite a lot more patterns here on the 404. So they each have their roles, and I do think the Move on its own has its place. I do enjoy using the Move on its own completely despite its limitations, and I also enjoy using the SP404 despite its limitations. But what I will say, I'm way more likely to use the Move solo because of its clean, structured format than I am to use the SP404. But of course, this is a sampler. You're meant to run things into it and sample and experiment in that way. So that's why I think these two go perfectly together. With the Move, I kind of know what kind of picture I'm painting. With the 404, it's where I get to find out what happens when you go outside the lines. And to me, that is sort of where the magic happens. So you put those two together and it can make some great results. If you have two pieces of gear that you love to combine, an unlikely pair, I would love to hear it in the comments. If you have both of these devices and are using them in similar ways, I would also like to hear from you. But that's going to be all for now. If you are interested in more combos, I did do a video about the Roland P6 with the Ableton Move, where I talked about some of the pros and cons of that duo. So go check that video out. Big shout out to the channel members, and thank you all for watching. Leave a like on your way out. This has been TAETRO. Have a good one.